we're going to bring you, Caroline Brocklebank is going to bring you a story this morning. When she mentioned it to me just a couple of days ago, she said to me, have you heard of loan charge? No. But I know about it now, or I know a bit more about it now, and I can judge by the reaction to a tweet from Caroline this morning that a lot of people know about it. You might not know about it. You may not think it affects you, but it might affect you, and it might affect somebody you know. It's to do with tax, and we'll hear, as you heard in the news, from an East Yorkshire man who hasn't even told his family that the taxman are chasing him for £170,000 because he had tax arrangements under a loan charge. We'll hear from various people, including a tax barrister. We'll hear from David Davis, MP. Caroline will be here on the Bernsey Show to explain it. Several people, because of this, and there's an estimated 50,000 people across the country affected by this, 7 people, I'm told, have taken their own lives because of this. Some of them owe the taxman hundreds of thousands of pounds. We'll find out what it's about. You may have a view on it. You may find out, because several public organisations in the past have used these tax arrangements, including the NHS. And there are versions of these schemes still alive. So you may find out that this does affect you. So if I were you, I would stay tuned and have a listen. It's important stuff. We'll talk about plenty of other stuff on the programme as well. I do hope you and yours are safe and well this Thursday morning. It's the Bernsey Show on BBC Radio Humberside.
David Burns.
The sound of Northern Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire.
And all the music you love. BBC Radio Humberside.
We're going to start with a serious one on the Bernsey Show this Thursday. A couple of days ago, I knew nothing about this. Now, as I sit here this Thursday morning at 10:10, I'm thinking, is this the next national scandal in the country? We've talked in the last week, and we talked on the Bernsey Show some years ago about the post office scandal, re the postmasters. And part of me, in terms of what I know about the subject we're going to talk about this morning, in my own mind, I'm thinking, is this the next national scandal? You'll have a chance to judge that. Some of you may come to that conclusion, some of you may not. What are you talking about, Bernsey? Well, we're going to talk about a story that Caroline Brocklebank has been following. And have you ever heard of the loan charge? You probably, like me, have never heard of the loan charge. But rather than me explain, our reporter Caroline Brocklebank is in the studio this morning. Nice to see you, Brockers. We'll not be too formal. We'll not be too formal, because I always call you Brockers.
You do.
But please explain what the loan charge is and why we should care. And maybe there'll be people listening to this programme who are involved in it and don't know they are. Please explain what the loan charge is.
So basically this mainly hits freelancers and contractors. Basically some people, including some NHS workers, as you've mentioned, some oil and gas workers, signed up to a scheme which manages their salary and tax. Now, a number of different companies offered these tax schemes, and workers would be paid a small amount of salary as a standard taxable income. Then they would receive a larger payment as a loan via an offshore trust. So only a very small amount of tax was paid on these loans, and there was no expectation they would be repaid. Now, the government has closed what they say is a loophole and used the loan charge to demand large sums in backdated tax from freelancers and contractors who use them. So the policy effectively adds up to third-party loans paid since 2010 and taxes them as income. Now, this has meant substantial bills, obviously, for many workers. But what you need to think about with this is the attraction of the schemes for a lot of people. They didn't necessarily even know about this whole tax avoidance or anything like that. People were attracted to these schemes because they just wanted someone who knew what they were doing to manage their tax, to do their paperwork, and then they didn't have to worry about it because someone that was an expert was sorting it all.
So they were going to companies who would do the loan charge.
So the loan charge is a government thing. The loan charge is the thing that the government are using to get back this tax. So these schemes are not the loan charge. These are just these schemes that people have signed up to.
Okay.
And they,
in good faith.
yeah, often in good faith. Obviously, I'm sure maybe some people signed up to it and knew what they were doing, but there was a lot of people here who didn't know what was happening here.
Okay.
And didn't necessarily benefit either. They didn't necessarily get, this unpaid tax. The companies got this unpaid tax.
Right.
And what you need to add into that as well is other people actually didn't even have a choice. Their employers told them, many in the public sector as well, that they had to sign up to these schemes to get their job. So they was forced into signing up to these schemes. So they didn't do it voluntarily.
Okay, so, and this was public sector organisations.
Yeah, so some NHS workers.
Like the NHS.
Yeah.
Some people working for the NHS as freelancers or contractors.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So
Bigger
that's
picture.
something to bear in mind.
Right, okay.
So Stephen is from East Yorkshire. I haven't been using his real name as he hasn't told his family about this.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've also used an actor, obviously, to voice what he said as well. And I asked him why he got involved with the scheme he signed up to.
At the time, I was working as a contractor. The places I was travelling, though, had various advertisements of, we can look after your payroll, etc. The current tax advisor I was using for my limited company, I had a couple of late penalty charges, so that was concerning. And a few people on the project I was working on at the time was using this particular company I ended up with. They were regularly coming and holding seminars, etc., saying, we can handle your payroll, we can handle your tax, it's HMRC compliant, we do your accounts. Basically, you're left to get on with the job. After the penalties that I had, I spoke to them. They had videos, they had all the documentation to say it was completely legal, completely compliant. It took away the hassle of contracting out where I was trying to manage my own books, receipts, etc. So I signed up. As far as I was concerned, it was something that was completely legal. It were advertised on billboards, so why would it not be legal?
So there you go. That's Stephen, and we'll hear more from Stephen. Bear in mind, this is an East Yorkshire man we've had to change his name and get an actor to voice what he's telling us because he hasn't even told his family. He's too scared to talk to his family about this. Caroline, what's the taxman? What's HMRC said to Stephen?
So they've obviously told him that he owes a huge amount of money, which Stephen obviously says he doesn't have. So they've offered him a payment plan, but first of all, that's obviously a huge amount, a huge cost. But it also means he has to admit he's done something wrong. And obviously you can hear there, he signed up to it in good faith. He didn't know what it was. And also, I'm not even sure if it was illegal. It was legal. So I've asked Stephen how much he owes and what options he has to pay.
I challenged the first sum of money and they offered me 7 years to pay it. And I did get some expenses considered because of the fact I was travelling at the time. And then I didn't hear anything for probably 6 to 9 months. And then I had another letter saying it had all been calculated wrong originally and that they added another £60,000 to it. So that last sort of calculation they offered was, I think it was £170,000 plus, working out to something like £1,700 a month for 10 years to make it, as they called it, a settlement. That means I have to accept that I did something wrong, and as far as I'm concerned, I didn't do anything wrong. And the scheme, that obviously I've learnt a lot about since finding out about all this, has never been proven to be illegal or wrong, yet I'm given no chance to defend that. The loan charge bypasses any chance of me having a fight. I either settle or I get hit with a loan charge. So the loan charge is separate. I either settle now for that amount and then it's closed, or I get hit with a loan charge and then I'll get inquiries and other taxes on top of that. I'd like to settle if the amount is a reasonable amount, which it clearly isn't. They'll hit me with the loan charge and I'll have to agree more time to pay. It wouldn't be the tax on the loans, it would also be the years that they said I should have paid, i.e. employers, employees and myself, even though I had my own limited company. The way I was set up, I was self-employed through this company that I was using this scheme with, but they're not going after the companies that should have paid the employers, the employees and all the taxes associated with that. They've just come straight for me. There's no way I can get out of it. They're coming for me even though all these scheme promoters have not been hit in any way or asked to pay any of these fees that they've taken off me. They've just got away scot-free.
Well, HMRC have said that they'd encourage customers who are worried to contact them. They say they will work with people to enter manageable payment plans.
Now, if you've got a thought on this, if you're hearing this or maybe this affects you, and we'll explain more as we go along, then do give us a shout on the Burnsy Show today. We'd love to hear from you. Coming up, we'll hear after 10:30 from a tax barrister. And after 11, the Halton Price and Howden MP, David Davis, will explain it from his point of view. He's got involved in Parliament in this and he's lobbying hard against his own government to try and do something about this. If this affects you, then do let us know today. We're already getting tweets saying, thank you very much for raising this. This affects me. Somebody said, I'm told by the taxman I owe £100,000. And this is serious stuff, because we're talking an estimated, Caroline, 50,000 people across the country, and we are told 7 people have actually taken their own lives. What effect is this having on people? What's Stephen saying?
Well,
about this?
you can't even imagine the stress and the worry that people are dealing with. This has been going on for a long time, actually. Now we're scratching the surface today. There's so much detail behind this. So he's stressed, he's worried, and you need to remember an estimate of 50,000 people are affected by this, but then imagine all the families and the people that are related to those people who are also affected by this. This affects a lot of people. So I asked Stephen why he hasn't told his family.
In the short term, I didn't think it would go on as long as it has. It's been 3 years of fighting it, and I think at the start, if you'd asked me, will you be fighting it in 3 years, I'd have laughed and said there's no way it could have gone as long. And do I still have an answer? No. I'm part of a number of JRs trying to sort of fight this. I do all I can personally to try and fight it, but I just don't have an answer. I mean, the final end game is that I cannot afford to pay the sums of money they're asking. It's either insolvency or bankruptcy. So because it's an unknown, to put my family through that unknown like I've gone through, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. At the time, I questioned the people I do speak to, fellow victims. Is it the right thing to do? It could help you. But to think I would have made them feel like I've felt over the last 3 years, the guilt, the spin the HMRC put on it to make you feel guilty, and I didn't do anything wrong. I took some bad advice and I'll regret it forever, and it could be the end of me financially, and I'll have to start again. But I don't want to put my family, my parents, and everyone else associated with me through that. That pain that I'm going through until I've got, a clear, right, this is the outcome. Unfortunately, I've tried. I fought as best as I can, but I'm going to have to go under, and these are the reasons why. Hopefully they'll look back and see I've done all that I can to fight my corner.
Well, as you can hear, Stephen just doesn't want to put his family through it. And at least 7 people, as you mentioned, have taken their lives. Gail spoke to the BBC, and her father took his own life and wrote a 13-page letter to his family explaining that he couldn't resolve his tax affairs and he blamed himself. And that is what commonly happens here, is people are blaming themselves and feel incredibly guilty about this. So I asked Stephen what impact it was having on his mental health. It's
incredibly tough. I can't even begin to tell you what a brown envelope in the letterbox does to you. I've got them and I've sat in the car and I've not even opened it. I daren't open it until I'm in the bathroom, just so I can cry. It's incredibly difficult.
So, Caroline, we're only just scratching the surface here, I feel. And if I'm honest, I'm still trying to get my head round all this and what's going on. What are what's HMRC saying in all this? And we will hear from David Davis and a tax barrister coming up on the programme as to why they think this is not fair and just. It's a retrospective tax, etc., etc. What's the official stance of HMRC at this stage?
HMRC have said to me the loan charge is, in their eyes, a way of making sure people pay their fair share of income tax and national insurance contributions.
That's all right, Brockers.
There you
Don't
go.
worry about it.
They say individuals are responsible for their own tax affairs, and it is right they continue to tackle these types of avoidance schemes as they deprive public services of vital funding. So that's what HMRC.
But some public bodies, just to confirm, have been using these schemes.
Yeah, well,
in the past,
HMRC
like the NHS,
have actually employed people, contractors that have had these schemes as well.
Have they?
Yeah.
Right.
They found out and stopped it, but
they've done it in the past. Right.
Yeah. So,
okay. Fine.
And they go on to say, Sir Amias Morse led an independent review into the policy in 2019 and concluded that it was right that the loan charge remain in force. The government recognised concerns around its impact, which is why it accepted that all but one of the recommendations made, leading to significant changes in legislation. So that's what HMRC say. It's probably just worth pointing out there, though, that the all-party parliamentary loan charge group, this is made up of MPs from all parties, did write a 16-page report about that review, saying that it failed basic tests of what would constitute an independent review into a government policy, and they claimed that FOIs show there was direct interference from HMRC and the Treasury.
Right. If I've got this right, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brockers, because people will be listening this morning thinking, right, does that affect me? People were looking for... There were companies out there who would offer to handle your tax affairs.
Yeah.
A contractor, self-employed, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was legal.
Yeah.
It was legal. Retrospectively, HMRC said, actually, we think this is tax avoidance, and therefore we will be looking for the back tax, even though they had said, I think, that they were happy with these arrangements.
Well, this is it.
And they were
this is
doing
where,
it
yeah.
in their employment of some contractors.
So this is where the dispute lies, because HMRC say it was never allowed, it should never have happened, and the loans are always subject to tax. But that's where there's a dispute around that.
And they're chasing individuals, and they are not chasing the companies.
Yeah, the HMRC did provide further information saying that, tax avoidance is now down. A lot of these companies have decided to leave the market because of what we're doing, because of the way we're tackling them. But yes, there are still schemes, maybe not exactly this scheme, but schemes similar to this. And HMRC have actually launched a campaign. They launched one in November 2020, specifically targeting contractors who may be approached by avoidance scheme promoters and encouraging them to, this is what they say, stop, challenge and, try and protect themselves. But so HMRC know that people are being, approached by these schemes. If
this is happening to you, or you're aware of this, or maybe you've just become aware of it, then do give us a shout on the Bernsey Show in the usual fashion. Stop the loan charge. There's obviously an organised group here, and this is, as we say, affecting an estimated 50,000 people. Tweet to say, thank you for giving attention to this underreported issue. It's scandalous what some of the victims are being put through. And they claim, even the head of HMRC describes the loan charge as a debacle. Thank you also to our next two guests coming up on the Bernsey Show, including David Davis MP, for advocating for the victims as always. And Stephen says, thank you, Caroline Brocklebank, for reporting on the loan charge. We begin to wonder if we have the plague, as despite its parallels with the postmaster scandal, few report the plight of 50,000 plus people. The real truth is HMRC and the Treasury misled MPs, according to Stephen. They, I suspect, would dispute that. What was always clear isn't quite the case. So if you've got a thought on that, are you aware of that? Do talk to me today. Caroline, we'll hear more. We'll hear from a tax barrister.
They are incredibly well read up on this as well. I mean, I've tried to simplify it, and I appreciate some people might be listening that know the full ins and outs of everything and think I haven't gone through every single detail, and I appreciate that.
Don't worry about that.
But we just need to try and make it
as
on
simple
the
as
possible.
I like it Janet and John.
Yeah.
In a Janet and John style for me, so I can get my head round it. And I'm still getting, if I'm honest, I'm still getting my head round it.
It's complicated. It is really complicated.
When you hear Stephen's story, and you're aware that 50,000 other people are out there, and you'll hear from David Davis, and you'll hear from the tax barrister, you'll think, hold on a minute, is this a bad decision? And people are standing by it in authority rather than holding their hands up and saying, look, we've got this wrong. The approach to this is not right. It'll be up to you to decide listening today. If you want to talk about it, do let us know. Caroline, thank you very much. Caroline Brocklebank bringing us that story. There might be more from Caroline through the programme. If you've got a question about it or anything like that. So I think it's important public interest, and it does, in the wake, for me, of the postmaster scandal that we've been talking about for a couple of years on this programme, and came to some sort of resolution last week. You think, hold on a minute, what's going on in this country? Why are people getting persecuted for no fault of their own? There may be some of you listening think, well, hold on a minute, they're trying to avoid paying income tax and tax like the rest of us. talk to me today. Would love to hear from you. If you've got a thought on that, do join in the Burnsy Show. Arthur says, thank you to Caroline Brocklebank for bringing this up. There's probably more than 50,000 impacted, plus this also affects the families. People have taken their own lives. There's been bankruptcies, home loss, family breakup, all sorts of things already happening due to this retrospective loan charge. We'll hear from a tax barrister on that, who's getting the teeth into it, coming up on the Burnsy Show this morning. We will talk about other things on the show, of course, but we thought this was in the public interest, and hopefully you're interested in it. It may be affecting you and you don't know. Especially if you're a contractor or a freelancer, if you've got somebody who might be handling your tax affairs and giving you some of your salary back as a loan. It's, like I say, I'm trying to get my head around it.
David Burns, BBC Radio Humberside.
We're majoring on this loan charge and the problems. You've heard Stephen's case. £170,000 HMRC want from him. He thought he was in a legitimate tax arrangement through a company, had HMRC approval, but then it would appear the goalposts moved, and now he's been chased for £170,000. It's been going on 3 years. He's too scared to tell his wife. And it affects, we're told, it's an estimate, nobody really knows the figure, 50,000 people across the country being told they owe HMRC money. I've been talking to Keith Gordon. He's a tax barrister, and he's been doing a lot of work to try and stop the loan charged. I've been sort of chatting to him, asking him why he got involved.
The loan charge is both wrong and unjust for the simple reason that it was introduced to let the revenue get tax that they had failed to get from the right people at the right time and in the right way. They had missed their boat and had been targeting the wrong individuals for tax that HMRC thought to be payable. Having realised that HMRC had pursued the wrong actions against the wrong people, the revenue needed a device that enabled them to collect the tax from the easiest people they can target, being the workers who have been missold these avoidance schemes.
Right. I'm coming to this fresh today, so I suspect, like lots of people listening to this will be thinking, how the heck in a fair and just country is this allowed to be going on? Why weren't they chasing the people that were perpetrating these schemes?
Well, probably at the time when this all happened, and this was in the noughties, the revenue had a belief that they could actually tax the individuals themselves. And that was a belief that was proven to be incorrect on a number of occasions, but the revenue persisted with it. Eventually, a case came to the Court of Session, which is the third level of the judiciary in Scotland. And the revenues had to change their arguments. This was a case against Rangers, the football club. And the revenue were told, their advice was, if you want to win this case, you're going to have to change your argument. And your argument is that these amounts are taxable, but at an earlier stage in the way these transactions were structured. And the revenue was successful in that case in 2015 on their third attempt. And again, that was confirmed in 2017 by the Supreme Court. But the problem with winning that argument was, whilst the revenue could then say, yes, these amounts are taxable, what the revenue found themselves stuck against was the problem that, yes, tax should have been deducted by the employers under the PAYE system. And by the fact that HMRC had failed to deduct tax, or that the employers had failed to deduct tax under PAYE, meant that actually it was the employees, the workers, did not need to pay the bill over to the revenue. It was for the employers, but the employers had long since disappeared, or it was too late for the revenue to chase them.
Right. So where are we at now? I mean, we've heard from Stephen today.
Yes.
Where's the law at for Stephen? Is there a class action going on, like we saw the case with the former sub postmasters and things like that in the last week or so? Is there a class action going on legally? Are you representing a number of clients?
There are a number of challenges to the underlying legislation, which I am not party to. they might or might not succeed in the courts. I'm defending one group of individuals who are being chased for their tax. And these were people who entered into these schemes between 2005 and 2010. The revenue had never said to them, these schemes do not work. And 10 years later, the revenue come along and saying, we don't like what you've done, we want the tax. And in those cases, we are running the argument, yes, tax should have been paid, but not by us, but by the people who are paying us. So we were claiming what is known as the PAYE credit, the credit for the PAYE that you should have had deducted. In other words, the revenue are going for the wrong people.
Right.
Now, we lost... Apologies.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It sounds like the Christmas fairy or the tooth fairy arrived there. It's a nice sound effect. Don't worry about it. Though I suspect the tooth fairy, given what you're telling me today, would probably be taxed heavily by the HMRC. But anyway, another issue.
Yes, exactly. Because when the tooth fairy leaves money under someone's pillow, they should have deducted some tax. And if they haven't deducted the right amount of tax, then the revenue should go for the tooth fairy. But what they're now doing is they're going for the little child saying, well, we don't care what the tooth fairy did or didn't do, we want the money from you.
It's a brilliant analogy, and the penny is dropping with me. These schemes are still going on, aren't they?
Yes, unfortunately. The official reason for introducing this law was to stop these schemes from happening anymore. The reality is they are still happening. They are being rebranded in ways that officially do not attract the ire of the revenue. But I've seen and heard discussions of how these schemes were sold, and I do not believe that these new schemes are any better. In fact, I think they are even less effective. It was less arguable that you can actually, these are effective schemes. And they are being sold to people who are working in the NHS, coming back from retirement, working on a contract basis to help the NHS, because apparently there's a bit of a crisis affecting the NHS at the moment. And the NHS is channeling some of these workers through contracts which are subject to these schemes. Now, it's not the NHS's fault itself, other than the fact that they're allowing some of their workers to get caught up and finding that in a few years' time, they've got a tax liability they were not expecting.
Right. Wow. Are you hopeful of a resolution for this?
Hopeful in as much as I hope for world peace and all sorts of other good things, motherhood and apple pie. I would like to think that there are people in Parliament who actually care about this enough to make a fuss. Now, you know David Davis, one of your local MPs, he has been very vocal in saying this loan charge is wrong.
We'll hear from him coming up.
Exactly. Down in London, you've got Ruth Cadbury, who's also making lots of noises. But unfortunately, we have a government with a large majority, and a lot of MPs are afraid to speak out of turn. And to be fair, we don't even have a very clear statement from the main opposition, the Labour Party. Keir Starmer knows about this, but doesn't seem too bothered to do anything about it. Last year, in June, there was an opportunity to modify things in Parliament, not solve the problem completely, but really to ameliorate the situation for many thousands of people. And it was debated, it was put forward by David Davis, and a backroom deal was done between Labour and the Conservative whips so that the question or the amendment did not even come to a vote. And what had happened was the Treasury had distributed a note to suggest that the amendments being proposed by David Davis and many other MPs, I think it was 55 MPs in total who had actually sponsored this amendment, the briefing note by the Treasury was just wrong. But the government doesn't actually care about the truth. All they want is to get a job done. And we're seeing this not just in the tax world, but in other areas where the truth is irrelevant. Can we get away with it? Is the modus operandi being adopted by government.
Fairly damning stuff from Keith Gordon, who is a tax barrister. You've heard him on the Burnsy show this morning. Is this affecting you? I would do share your story. We would protect your anonymity if you're caught up in this. An emailer says, how come employers and tax advisors have been allowed to promote these schemes in the first place? We're on a bike to 2 o'clock on the Burnsy Show today. We're majoring, certainly in the first hour and a half of the programme, on the loan charge scandal. Hopefully you're getting your head round it. If it's affecting you, I would love to hear from you today. We'll hear from David Davis MP, the Howden and Holton Price MP, or is it Holton Price and Howden MP? You know who he represents, one of our local MPs. He's heavily involved in this, trying to get justice and fairness for those that have been chased by HMRC, the taxman, for money. And it's affecting a lot of lives. Red Mole says, you're doing a grand job, Burnsy, on the very complex loan charge scandal. This is destroying my family as we speak. The lies and cover-up from HMRC Government UK is disgusting. We're real people here. Thank you for your contributions. A lot of stuff coming into the programme about this morning. Loan charge APPG says... powerful coverage of the scandal by Burnsy and Caroline Brocklebank on BBC Radio Humberside this morning. The loan charge was proposed by HMRC to cover their own failures and overrides the rule of law by taking away the basic right to challenge HMRC in court. It is sinister and dangerous. We'll have more on this. Please understand the state are not telling the truth. We are David against Goliath. Says Red Mole. There's a lot of stuff coming in and around this. If you've got a thought on this, or maybe it affects you, I would like to hear your story this morning. It's the Burnsy Show on BBC Radio Humberside.
David Burns.
The sound.
The sound of Northern Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire. And all the music you love. BBC Radio Humberside.
Paul Haley says, Burnsy, yes, it is a scandal. Been going on for years for me. I live on a basic state pension and HMRC want 90% of it, and I haven't worked for 4 years, nearing 70 now. They don't reply, only send more forms. Perfectly legal scheme, so they moved the goalposts. We'll hear from David Davis MP after this. On the loan charge tax scandal, Helen Jane Fernandez sends me a tweet at BBC Burnsy. Loan charge debacle doesn't only impact those directly affected. I'm the mum of a loan charge victim, and our lives have been a living hell for 3 years now, just waiting for the next brown envelope to come through the letterbox. This is so overly unfair, and gov.uk just don't want to listen. It was our East Riding man who owes £170,000 to the taxman, who set up his tax arrangements, not trying to avoid tax, with a company that said, we'll look after your tax arrangements. We'll pay you some money. We'll give you a loan on the money. It's all perfectly legal. It's been cleared by HMRC. In fact, we're told this morning the HMRC have been using the scheme themselves to employ contractors and freelancers. And the NHS and other public bodies have been using it. He told us that he's been doing this for 3 years, too scared to tell his family. If you've got a thought on this, do let me know. If this has caught you out, or maybe you're a freelancer or a contractor and it's just dawned on you this morning that, hold on, I think I'm in one of these schemes with an independent company looking after my tax affairs. Have I got a tax liability? Do talk to me today. But some people, an estimated 50,000 in the country, have been told they owe massive amounts of money to HMRC. It's something the Holton Price and Howden MP David Davis has been following and getting involved in. I've been chatting to him and asking him why he got involved.
Well, it started off with a couple of constituents coming to me at surgeries telling me that they were facing enormous demands from the taxpayer because they had been involved in what the revenue call a disguised remuneration scheme. Now, these were not city slickers or big merchant bankers or whatever. These were just ordinary people. One of them was a 70-year-old pensioner on basic pension. My first instinct, frankly, was say, well, you've been avoiding tax. It sort of serves you right, which I suspect is most people's instinct. But then I looked into it. And in each case, they had not really set out to avoid paying tax. I mean, one of them had just taken advice from his accountant or his tax advisor and has been told it's entirely legal. And the other one actually had he tried to avoid having to set up his own company, so he'd taken the taxman's advice and entered into an umbrella company arrangement. So these sort of technical arrangements, but neither of them set out to do it. So I started to look wider, and I found that there were 50,000 people who were having demands made upon them, huge demands in some cases, tens, even hundreds of thousands of pounds, from decades back, for schemes that they had to join. And we're talking here locum nurses, social workers, even people who work for contractors who work for HMRC, work for the tax authorities, and they have been told the contract is this, you have to accept your payment on this basis, and they ended up, all of them, with this enormous or sizable tax liabilities. So that's how it started. It started with a couple of constituency cases, which at first, as I say, I was quite sceptical of, because I thought, you're responsible for your tax affairs and so on. And it turned out vast numbers of people had either been required, because that was the terms of the job, or advised badly, or misled into undertaking schemes which at the time the tax authorities were not arguing about. In fact, indeed, there were a number of people who wrote to the tax authorities, and got banal letters back saying, this seems okay, but those same people still got the tax man come back 10 years later. So that was the origin. That's how I sort of first got involved. And as with anything I pick up, I try to make an issue of it, because that's the only way you can get governments to move. And so that's what I did.
Okay. And where are you at now with it? Are governments moving?
Well, no, they're not at the moment.
Why not, David?
I'm more angry than I ever was. I mean, part of the problem is governments, any government, no matter what politics it is, finds it very difficult to admit mistakes. And the story of this starts with a whole series of government mistakes. Back from 2000 to 2010, as I say, they were being quite banal and bland about this, and not paying too much attention. And the law undoubtedly was very uncertain. It was very unclear, the law that the tax law that the government of the day had created. Then round about, towards 2010, they started to get a bit more serious about it, but then they started losing tax cases. They go to the courts, and the courts are saying to the tax authorities, "No, you're wrong. You can't. Unfortunately, you've written the law in this way, and the taxpayer is obeying the law. So hard luck." So then in 2010, they set out to change the law. Eventually changed it in 2011, and they thought they'd fix the problem. And then they went to another set of cases, and they lost 3 huge, really emblematic, symbolic cases over the course of 2010 to 2015, until eventually in 2017, they won the Supreme Court case. Right. So up until 2017, nobody really knew what the law properly was. And then in 2017, they moved another piece of law, and they made it retroactive. In the first instance, right back to 2000. Retrospective is what I would call it, but they call it retroactive. Now, this is quite improper. I mean, governments are not supposed to make retrospective laws except in real emergencies, wartime and things like that. Because, how can you obey a law that when you don't know what it is? But that's what they did. So we had a big row, and we did win one concession. The government appointed a man called Amias Morse, the ex-head of the National Audit Office, to look at this and come up with a conclusion. Well, of course, what he did is, he's an ex-Whitehall employee. He came up with a compromise. He said, well, everything before 2010 doesn't count, so you've got to ignore that. But that still left 40,000 people in this place. And I repeat, these are locum nurses, social workers, contractors for government in one way or another, or people who work for contractors for government. And they're still left in this position.
And it's ruining lives, isn't it? In some cases, I understand some people have been taking their own lives.
Well, it's more than ruining lives. It is, as you say. I mean, at least 7 suicides, and it's bad enough it's a suicide, but just think what a suicide does to the family. One of the families wrote to the all-party group about this, and let me read you just a section of what they said about a man who committed suicide. Their husband brother, father, son. He wrote about being at the end of his tether with a loan charge matter. He wrote such awful things about himself, things that just weren't true, that he clearly thought about himself at the time. He wrote he did not set out to do such wrongdoings. He wrote about being unable to speak to his GP about his anxiety as he was ashamed, his fear of going to prison, his disgust in himself for getting mixed up in a loan charge, and his belief that he would now go to hell. That's effectively an extract from a letter, from a suicide letter, a man who committed suicide. This is what the government's doing to people. And frankly, in the scheme of things, the amount of money concerned from the government's point of view is pretty small. I mean, it'll be lost in the coronavirus cost completely. But for the individuals concerned, I mean, in a number of cases, it's over £100,000, and very often to people who are either pensioners now or are approaching their retirement, and so many of them are going to lose their houses. And with that, their self-respect. It'll cause a breakup of families. It'll cause enormous distress. All these things because the government can't admit it got it wrong in the first place.
Is there any sign that that might change and they'll put they will right the wrongs and play fair? Is there any sign of that?
Well, there's no sign from them, but only the other day I was talking to a man called Lord Forsyth, Michael Forsyth, who is the chairman of the committee appointed in the Lords on this matter, and some more information is beginning to come out about how the government approached this, and it's too soon. I can't tell you the details because it's a parliamentary committee's business, not mine, Bernsey. So I've got to be a bit careful. But let me put it this way: it is going to come back after the Queen's speech. Once we've got through the Queen's speech, which is in a few weeks' time, this issue is going to come back, and it's going to come back in spades. I am determined. I mean, I don't always win my battles, but heavens, this is one that needs to be won. And I'm not the only one. There's a couple of hundred MPs who are concerned about it, and lots of Lords as well. So we're not giving up. We're keeping going. And if we have to embarrass the government into changing its mind again, then that's what we'll have to do.
Powerful stuff from David Davis, the Halton Price and Howden MP, on the Bernsey Show on BBC Radio Humberside today. The story brought to you by Caroline Brocklebank, and you heard from Stephen, not his real name, we disguised his voice earlier. And David Davis saying, it's locum nurses, contractors, all sorts of people involved in this. HMRC themselves were using these sort of schemes to employ contractors and freelancers. Sir Amias Morse led an independent review into the policy in 2019, concluded that it was right that the loan charge remain in force. The government recognised concerns around its impact, which is why it accepted that all but one of the recommendations made, leading to significant changes in legislation. Worth pointing out that the All-Party Parliamentary Loan Charge Group, made up of MPs from all parties, wrote a 16-page report saying that Sir Amias Morse-led review fails basic tests of what should constitute an independent review into a government policy. They claim freedom of information requests show there was a direct interference from HMRC and the Treasury. If you've got a thought on that, or that's affecting you, do talk to me today.
Call Bernsey now.
08000 66 5959.